With that, we'll bring in our panel. Mark Montgomery, a retired Rear Admiral. Thanks for coming on. And the Senior Director at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. John Burns is here, U.S. Marine and Army veteran, and the Strategic Director at Concerned Voices for America. Lengthy titles. Good to see both of you here. Admiral, I'll start with you. President Trump clearly showing that he's ready to speak. It appears that maybe Venezuela is as well. Can we just pull this back? Why is so much focused on Venezuela at this point, in your expert opinion?
Well, I think first, Venezuela is an illegal regime. There's a democratically elected opposition that Maduro has suppressed and kept power. He's backed by a military. So when President Trump looks at him, he sees an authoritarian in his hemisphere who acts contrary to U.S. national security interests. Venezuela works with Cuba, China, Russia, countries we don't get along with, and cooperates with them. So I think when he looks at Venezuela, he sees a uniquely discomforting neighbor to the south.
I'll play this too, and John, we'll get to you in a moment, but here's more of what President Trump had to say last night about current relations with Venezuela and how Congress now factors into this entire equation. Watch.
I'd like to keep Congress involved. I mean, we're stopping drug dealers and drugs from coming into our country. And I actually told Marco and some of the people, our Secretary of State is doing a great job, by the way, I said, go to Congress and let them know we're not letting drugs come through Mexico. We're not letting them come through Venezuela. And let Congress know about it. We don't have to get their approval, but I think letting them know is good. The only thing I don't want them to do is leak information that's very important and confidential and may put our military at risk, or whoever is doing, CIA, military, etc. But I did say, I said, go and see Congress, see the representatives that we're supposed to be seeing, and be open about it. If they say, we don't want you to stop drugs from coming into the country, I don't think that would be good, yes.
And John, what was your assessment of the president's remarks there? Because what I got was, hey, I want to do things right. I want to include Congress in all these discussions. But I also don't want 400-plus members having access to information that could potentially be leaked due to the political climate.
I understand there's a long history of merely consulting with Congress when there are evolving crises in the world. At the end of the day, if we're talking about a major combat operation against a sovereign state, even if it's headed by an evil and illegal dictator like Maduro, Congress should weigh in with at least an authorization for use of military force. Very encouraged by the fact that President Trump is using kind of a combination of diplomacy and a show of military force to force Maduro to the table, which seems to be one of the most recent developments. I'm very, very encouraged that it looks like there may be a negotiated settlement here.
All right. And Admiral, I'll get your thoughts on this. An article last night from our website, Newsmax.com, citing a prominent Venezuelan political figure about this whole situation. The article reads in part, a U.S. military attack on Venezuela is now imminent, according to opposition leader and recent Nobel Peace Prize laureate Maria Corina Machado. Machado, who has long been at the forefront of Venezuela's pro-democracy movement, said over the weekend that all indicators now point toward a U.S. strike, calling the situation grave. She said Venezuelans must prepare for a final phase in the country's struggle to end Maduro's authoritarian rule. Admiral, if I can just get your thoughts on that, and also it's been a back and forth of, does the United States want to see a regime change? Is this about regime change? Your overall assessment of that statement.
So, look, I think the United States is briefing her as the actual, as the actual legitimate government of Venezuela. We're probably providing some briefings to her or people in Miami and on what we're doing. I don't think she knows the timing of it. Just like and I gotta say, I support the president in his belief that Congress leaks, but nobody leaks more than any administration, and you could think of Signalgate and a few other things to remind you that. But so he's worried about leaks. I understand they're briefing her, but I would not go on her timing. I would go on the president's timing and Secretary Hegseth's timing for understanding when this might be executed. I do worry a little bit about regime change. I understand this isn't exactly regime change in the sense that Maduro is not the legitimate leader. But we do not want to get involved in a messy domestic power struggle in Venezuela with troops on the ground and things like that. That's absolutely not in the president's interest. It's not in the United States' national security interests. And considering all the other challenges we have, particularly in the Pacific, I don't think we want to tie down significant U.S. forces doing this.
Yeah, and John, just final thoughts from you on this. I mean, at the end of the day, is this really about keeping Americans safe? You see these drug boats, according to the State Department, according to the Secretary of War, that these boats are carrying alleged narco-terrorists. We've seen strike after strike, more than a dozen of these. Is this about keeping Americans safe, keeping drugs from entering this great nation?
I think the president and Secretary Hegseth absolutely, believe that they are doing their best to keep America safe. It's totally, what the president has run on. It's what he believes in. It shows, I think it demonstrates one of the key things here is he's demonstrating that pivot to the Western Hemisphere that he has talked about, at length, and demonstrating that we're not going to be as involved in places like Europe and the Middle East. I think all of that's great. I totally agree with the Admiral that boots on the ground is a terrible idea in Venezuela. We have a history, just like the Middle East, we have a history of boots on the ground in Latin America not being the greatest idea, not creating the best outcomes for America. Concerned Veterans for America, we absolutely are working to see that, again, this has a negotiated solution that's best for the people of Venezuela, best for the people of the United States.
Really quickly, Admiral, if I could go back to you about the carrier. I failed to address this earlier. The massive carrier, is that out just outside of those waters near Venezuela, is that a flex by this administration?
It is. I think it's a little bit performative, but it also brings a lot of capability. If you decide that not an invasion, but if you want to impose cost on Maduro, particularly on the fact, instead of shooting these little ships, the arrows, shoot the actual Archer, the factories that turn Colombian paste into cocaine for delivery to Europe and the United States. That this ship and its attached carrier strike group are the perfect vessel for doing that.
All right. We appreciate the time of Admiral Mark Montgomery and his service, as well as John Burns. Thank you both for your service, and thank you for your time.